We live in a world of endless options. Open Netflix and you're hit with thousands of shows. Walk into a supermarket and you'll find 15 brands of the same cereal. Scroll online and there are a million people telling you what to buy, eat, or wear. On the surface, this seems like freedom. More options should mean more power, more control, and more happiness. But strangely enough, the opposite happens. This is called the paradox of choice. Here's the twist. The more choices we have, the harder it becomes to actually make one. Psychologist Barry Schwartz explained this with a simple experiment. People were offered two setups. One table with 6 flavors of jam and another table with 24 flavors. Which table do you think sold more jam? The big table attracted more attention, but the small table sold far more. Why? Because too many choices overwhelm the brain. With 24 flavors, people froze. With 6 flavors, they could decide. Choice feels like freedom until it paralyzes you. Even when we do choose, having too many options makes us less satisfied with our choice. Think about buying a phone. If there are only 2 models, you pick one and move on. But if there are 50 models, your brain keeps nagging you. What if the other one had a better camera? What if that one had more storage? Did I choose wrong? Instead of enjoying what you picked, you're haunted by the possibilities of what you didn't pick. That nagging doubt, that's choice backfiring. We see this everywhere. On dating apps, endless profiles give you the illusion of abundance. But studies show people actually feel lonelier and less committed because they're always wondering if someone better is just one swipe away. On streaming platforms, the average person spends 20 minutes just scrolling before picking a show, sometimes never picking at all. Too much choice leads to no choice. Even in careers, students faced with hundreds of majors report more stress and regret compared to those with fewer paths. More options should create more opportunity. Instead, it creates more anxiety. Psychologists describe 2 types of decision makers: maximizers and satisficers. Maximizers want the absolute best. They research every review, compare every price, and won't commit until they're sure they've found the perfect option. But because they've seen so many possibilities, they end up less happy, even if their choice is objectively better. Satisficers, on the other hand, look for something good enough. Once they find it, they stop searching. They may not always pick the very best, but they're more satisfied with what they do pick. Ironically, settling often brings more peace than striving for perfection. So why does too much choice hurt us? It's partly biology. Our brains evolved in environments where options were limited. A few kinds of food, a few people to choose as partners, a few paths for survival. Our decision-making hardware wasn't built to handle thousands of options on a glowing screen. Too many possibilities create decision fatigue. The more choices we face, the more our mental energy drains, until even small decisions feel exhausting. And when the choice is finally made, our expectations are higher. If it doesn't feel perfect, we blame ourselves. I should have chosen better. That regret is the cost of abundance. The paradox of choice is everywhere in modern life. More options make us feel free, but they can also trap us in endless hesitation, self-doubt, and regret. The trick isn't to eliminate choice, it's to limit it, to set boundaries, to learn when good enough is actually great. Because sometimes, real freedom isn't having endless options. It's being at peace with the one you finally choose. Imagine a ship, the legendary ship of Theseus. Over time, the wooden planks rot one by one. Each plank is replaced with a new one. Years later, not a single original piece remains. Here's the question: is it still the same ship? At first, it feels like a simple yes or no, but think about it longer and the problem grows. If you say yes, then what actually makes it the same if every part has changed? If you say no, then when did it stop being the original? After the first plank, the last one, somewhere in between? This is the ship of Theseus paradox, a question about identity that's been around for over 2,000 years. Here's where it gets personal. This isn't just about an ancient ship. It's about you. Every cell in your body eventually dies and gets replaced. Your skin cells are gone in weeks, your blood in months. Even your bones completely regenerate over years. So, if every physical part of your body is eventually replaced, are you still the same person you were when you were born? Or even 5 years ago? And it's not just physical. Our thoughts, memories, and personalities change too. You probably believe things now that your younger self would have disagreed with. So, what exactly stays constant? Philosophers made the problem worse with a twist. What if someone took all the old planks from the ship of Theseus and rebuilt the original ship somewhere else? Now we have two ships, one made of brand new parts, but replaced over time, one made of the original parts, but reassembled later. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? The one with historical continuity, or the one with the original material? Apply that to yourself. If your mind was copied exactly into another body, would that still be you? Or is the real you the one with your current physical body, even if your mind changes? The paradox is unsettling because it attacks the idea that there's a clear, unchanging self. We like to believe we have a stable identity, that the me from 5 years ago is the same me today, just older and wiser. But if all the parts have changed, maybe the me is more of a story we tell ourselves than a fixed thing. It's like a river. The water is constantly flowing, changing, but we still call it the same river. Is that because of the water, or because of the shape of the riverbed? Philosophers have tried to answer the ship of Theseus problem in different ways. Continuity theory. It's the same object if there's an unbroken history linking the old version to the new. In other words, the process of replacement matters more than the original material. Material theory. The real object is the one with the original parts. If you rebuild a ship from its old planks, that's the ship of Theseus. Psychological continuity. For people, what makes you you isn't your body, but your memories, consciousness, and personality. Lose those, and maybe you're not the same anymore, even if your body is. Each answer solves one problem, but creates another. This isn't just an abstract puzzle for philosophy nerds. It matters in real life. If someone gets a heart transplant, they're still considered the same person. But what if we replaced every organ over time? At what point, if any, would they stop being them? With technology, the question gets even trickier. If we could upload your mind into a computer, would that digital copy be you? What if it acted exactly like you, remembered your childhood, and felt emotions? These aren't hypothetical anymore. AI, cloning, and brain-computer interfaces are pushing us toward real-world ship of Theseus situations. The ship of Theseus teaches us that identity isn't as simple as we want it to be. Maybe you aren't just your body. Maybe you're not just your memories. Maybe you're a combination of changing parts, held together by the story you believe about yourself. Because in the end, whether it's a ship or a human, the real question isn't, what is the original? It's, what makes something or someone truly the same over time? A scientist in the year 2100 builds a time machine. She travels back to the year 2025 and hands Shakespeare a copy of Hamlet. Shakespeare publishes it word for word. Generations pass. In 2100, that same scientist studies Hamlet, memorizes it, and takes it back to Shakespeare in 2025. Here's the question. Who actually wrote Hamlet? If Shakespeare got it from the scientist, and the scientist got it from Shakespeare, then It seems like the play came from nowhere. No origin, no creator, just an endless loop of cause and effect, feeding itself forever. This is the bootstrap paradox, one of the strangest mind benders in time travel theory. The bootstrap paradox is what happens when something is sent back in time and becomes the very cause of itself in the future. It's a closed loop, a self-contained timeline. The object, the idea, or the piece of information exists, but it was never created. It simply is. Think of it like a circle with no starting point. If you point to anywhere on the circle and ask, where did it begin? You can't. The loop has no beginning. Let's say one night you're sitting at your desk, struggling to write a song. Suddenly, an older version of you appears in the room and hands you the sheet music to your future hit. You record it, release it, and become famous. Years later, you find a time machine. You travel back to the exact night you first got the song and hand it to your younger self. The song exists, but it came from where? From you? From your future self? Or from no one at all? The name comes from the phrase, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. It's an old, impossible image. You can't lift yourself into the air by tugging on your own boots. But the paradox is about something doing exactly that, existing without ever being made in the first place. The bootstrap paradox is unsettling because it challenges our most basic idea about reality, that everything has a cause. We're wired to think in straight lines. This causes that, which causes the next thing. But in a bootstrap loop, there's no straight line. Cause and effect chase each other in a circle. It's like asking, who taught the first teacher? Who invented the first language? Who told the first joke? In a bootstrap loop, the answer might be no one. It just appeared in the timeline and kept going. While the bootstrap paradox is mostly talked about in science fiction, it actually comes up in physics discussions about time travel. If time travel to the past is possible, even in theory, then paradoxes like this aren't just storytelling tricks. They're real logical problems science would have to solve. Some physicists suggest that if time travel exists, the universe might allow bootstrap loops, as long as they don't break consistency. In other words, the loop might be strange, but it wouldn't create contradictions. Others think bootstrap loops are proof that backwards time travel is impossible because objects and information can't just exist without an origin. In Doctor Who, the Doctor gets Beethoven's sheet music from history, but then discovers Beethoven never existed. So he publishes the music himself, under Beethoven's name, creating the loop. In the movie Terminator, John Connor sends Kyle Reese back in time to protect his mother, who then becomes John Connor's father. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry thinks he's saved by his father's ghost, but it was actually his future self using magic, an event that causes itself. These stories fascinate us because they feel like magic, but it's magic born from logic we can't quite escape. The bootstrap paradox forces us to ask, does every idea, object, or event need a beginning? Or could some things exist in an eternal loop with no true origin? And if that's possible, how much of our reality might be like that without us even noticing? Maybe the song you're humming right now wasn't written by anyone. Maybe it's been echoing through time, forever. The Sorites paradox. Imagine a heap of sand sitting on the floor. You remove one grain. Is it still a heap? Of course it is. You remove another grain. Still a heap. You keep going, one grain at a time. At what exact moment does it stop being a heap? Which grain turns it from heap to not a heap. That's the Sorites paradox, also known as the paradox of the heap. It's a simple question that destroys our ability to draw clear lines. The paradox dates back to ancient Greece. The word Sorites comes from the Greek for heap. Philosophers used it to show that vague concepts like heap, tall, rich, or old are slippery. They don't have precise boundaries, but we talk about them as if they do. It's not just about sand. It's about when change becomes enough to matter. If you take $1 away from a millionaire, they're still rich. Take away another dollar, still rich. Keep going. At what exact amount of money do they stop being rich and become poor? There's no universally agreed point. Everyone's boundary is different. Aging. When does a child become an adult? Is it the 18th birthday? The day after? Or was it gradual? A mix of tiny changes over years. The Sorites paradox says there's no single magic moment. Identity. We change constantly, physically and mentally. But when do you become a different person from who you were? After one new experience? After 100? After a lifetime? The paradox doesn't give a clear answer. And that's the point. The Sorites paradox works because of two things humans love: logic and categories. We like to think in black and white terms. Heap or not heap, rich or poor, young or old. But the real world runs on gradual change, and gradual change breaks logic. If removing one grain doesn't change something's category, then no single removal ever will. Yet we know that eventually the heap is gone. That's the contradiction. In technology, think about deleting files from your phone. One photo doesn't make a difference to your storage space, but eventually you'll free up gigabytes. Which exact photo tipped you over? You can't say. In habits, missing one workout doesn't make you unfit. Missing two doesn't either. But at some point, you do become unfit. You just can't pinpoint the moment it happened. In relationships, trust isn't lost in a single moment. It's lost grain by grain. Tiny lies, missed promises, subtle changes. By the time you notice, the heap is gone. The Sorites paradox isn't just a brain game. It reveals why so many human arguments are endless. We fight over when a fetus becomes a person, when speech becomes harmful, when debt becomes unmanageable, when climate change becomes a crisis. These are all Sorites problems. We're arguing about where to draw a line in a world without clear lines. It also shows how easy it is for people to ignore slow, gradual change. If each step feels too small to matter, we don't notice the big transformation until it's too late. Philosophers and logicians have tried to solve the paradox. Draw an arbitrary line. Even if it's not perfect, just decide 1,000 grains is a heap, 999 is not. It's clean, but it feels fake. Fuzzy logic. Instead of yes, no categories, use sliding scales. You're sort of rich, mostly adult, halfway to empty. This matches reality better, but it's messy. Reject the question. Some argue the paradox only exists because of vague language, not because the world is unclear. Change the definitions, and the paradox disappears. The Sorites paradox reminds us that life is made of tiny changes. Changes so small we barely notice them until everything is different. A relationship doesn't collapse in a single fight. A habit doesn't form in a single day. And a heap of sand doesn't vanish with a single grain. Maybe the lesson isn't to find the exact moment of change, but to pay attention to the little grains along the way. Because sometimes, by the time you notice the heap is gone, it's already too late to put it back. The liar's paradox. Here's a sentence. This statement is false. Think about it. If the sentence is true, then what it says must be correct, meaning it's false. But if it's false, then what it says is wrong, meaning it's true. So which is it? True or false? This is the liar's paradox, a simple line of words that ties logic into knots. It's one of the oldest, simplest, and most mind-breaking paradoxes in philosophy. The earliest version comes from ancient Greece, credited to the philosopher Epimenides. He supposedly said, "All Cretans are liars." But Epimenides was a Cretan. If he's telling the truth, then he's lying. If he's lying, then maybe he's telling the truth. Over time, philosophers boiled this down to the cleaner form. This statement is false. No frills, just pure contradiction. The liar's paradox works because it's self-referential. The sentence talks about itself. Most of the time, language points outward. If I say, "The sky is blue," we check the sky. But if I say, "This sentence is false," the only thing to check is the sentence itself. It's like a snake eating its own tail. No matter where you start, you end up back where you began. This kind of logic loop pops up more than you think. In promises. I promise I will never keep a promise. If you keep that promise, you've broken it. If you break it, you've kept it. In rules, the only rule is ignore all rules. Follow it, and you've broken it. Break it, and you followed it. In systems, bureaucracies sometimes create contradictory rules that can't both be followed, forcing you into a liar's paradox in real life. These situations are frustrating because they're not just hard to solve, they're impossible to solve without breaking the logic. At first, it's tempting to treat the liar's paradox as a fun puzzle and move on, but it points to something bigger: the limits of language and logic. Our brains like to think the world is clean and binary. Things are either true or false, right or wrong. But the liar's paradox shows there are statements that don't fit neatly into either category. They exist in a kind of logical glitch. And if language can break this easily, what does that say about all the other things we build on language? Laws, science, morality? Logicians have wrestled with this for centuries. Some tried to fix it, ban self-reference, make a rule that statements can't talk about themselves. Clean, but it cuts out a huge part of language. Third truth value. Instead of just true or false, add a third option: undefined. The liar's paradox lives here. It's neither true nor false. Truth hierarchies create different levels of truth, so a statement can't directly judge itself, like separating the judge from the trial. Even today, in computer science and AI, paradoxes like this are important, because self-referential loops can crash systems or cause infinite errors. In programming, a liar's paradox can literally break code. If you give a system an instruction that contradicts itself, it can get stuck forever, trying to resolve something that has no resolution. In law and politics, self-contradicting rules create endless loopholes. In media, a statement like, "Everything you read here is fake," becomes a paradox the moment you start reading it. And on a personal level, you've probably met people whose words function like a liar's paradox, statements that can't be reconciled but are delivered as if they make perfect sense. The liar's paradox is more than a word trick. It's a mirror showing us the edges of our logical world. It reminds us that some problems can't be solved by picking true or false. Sometimes the most interesting questions aren't about choosing one side. They're about realizing the question itself breaks the game. Because when language eats itself, when logic folds back in on itself, you're left with a sentence that just stares back at you and says, "This statement is false," and there's nothing you can do about it. The paradox of happiness. We live in a world obsessed with happiness. Every book, every podcast, every ad promises to show you the secret to feeling good. We set goals, make vision boards, plan dream vacations, all with the same aim, to be happy. But here's the strange thing. The harder you chase happiness directly, the harder it seems to catch. And the moment you stop chasing it, it often just shows up. This is the paradox of happiness, also known as the hedonic treadmill. Think of happiness like running on a treadmill. You can sprint, push harder, sweat more, but the moment you stop, you're still in the same place. That's because happiness, in the long run, doesn't stay fixed. Psychologists have found that we all have a sort of baseline level of happiness, a set point. Big positive events, like winning the lottery, can boost it for a while. Big negative events, like losing a job, can lower it. But over time, we drift back to that baseline. It's like upgrading to the latest phone. For a week, you feel great. A month later, it's just your phone. Here's the tricky part. When you make happiness your main goal, you start measuring it constantly. Am I happy yet? Did that make me happier? What about now? That constant checking gets in the way. You notice every moment you don't feel happy. You compare yourself to people who seem happier. You treat happiness like a product you can buy or a finish line you can cross. The result? You feel less happy, not more. It's like trying to fall asleep. The more you think, I have to fall asleep now, the harder it gets. Vacations. You plan the perfect trip, imagining how amazing it will be. But the higher the expectation, the more pressure there is to feel happy the whole time. One bad meal or rainy day can ruin it, because it didn't match the happiness you were promised. Social media. We post to get likes, thinking they'll make us feel good. And they do, for a second. But soon, we're refreshing the app, chasing that little spike again. It's never enough. Success. You land your dream job. At first, you feel on top of the world. But soon, it becomes normal. You set your sights on the next big thing, convinced that then you'll be happy. The treadmill keeps moving. The paradox is that when you stop chasing happiness directly, you often stumble into it naturally. When you focus on meaningful activities, helping others, learning new skills, building relationships, happiness becomes a side effect, not the main target. It's like sunlight on a hike. You don't stare at the sun trying to grab it. You walk the path, and the light follows you. Studies show that people who focus on purpose and engagement, rather than just feeling happy, report higher long-term well-being. They still experience ups and downs, but their baseline gradually rises. It's the difference between eating candy and eating a healthy meal. Candy gives you a quick sugar rush, but it crashes fast. Real nourishment takes time, but it lasts longer. Shift focus from feelings to actions. Ask, what can I do that matters? Instead of, what will make me happy right now? Lower the pressure. Accept that not every moment needs to be perfect. Happiness grows in space, not in constant monitoring. Practice gratitude. Not the forced kind, but genuinely noticing small things you already have. Gratitude grounds you in the present instead of chasing a future high. Build routines, not quests. Sustainable habits create a stable foundation for happiness to land on, even when you're not looking for it. The paradox of happiness teaches us that joy isn't something you hunt down and trap. It's something that happens when you're busy living, working, and connecting with the world around you. Happiness isn't the finish line. It's the quiet companion that walks alongside you once you stop demanding it to show up. So maybe the secret to being happy is to stop trying so hard to be happy. Zeno's paradoxes. You stand at one end of a room. Your goal? Walk to the other side. Easy, right? Now here's the twist. Before you get all the way there, you first have to get halfway. And before you get halfway, you have to get a quarter of the way. And before that, an eighth. And before that, a 16th. The closer you get, the more steps there are left to take. In fact, the steps never end, which means, according to ancient Greek philosopher Zeno, you'll never actually get there. This is one of Zeno's paradoxes, brain-bending arguments that seem to prove motion itself is impossible. Zeno came up with several of these, but one of the most famous is Achilles and the tortoise. In this race, Achilles gives a tortoise a head start. Achilles runs fast, but by the time he reaches where the tortoise started, the tortoise has moved a little further ahead. When Achilles reaches that point, the tortoise has moved again. No matter how fast Achilles runs, he's always chasing and never actually catching up. In reality, we know Achilles will pass the tortoise, but in Zeno's logic, there are infinite points to cross before that happens, and crossing an infinite number of points should take infinite time. Zeno's paradoxes mess with our heads because they break motion into infinite steps. Our brains can't easily reconcile infinity with everyday life. We see people walking, racing, and catching each other all the time. Yet the logic seems airtight. If you can divide distance into infinitely smaller and smaller parts, then there are infinitely many tasks to complete, and you can't finish an infinite list. Ever sat down to finish a project and thought, "I'm almost done?" for hours? You finish one section, then realize there's just a little more, and a little more. The closer you get, the more the goal seems to stretch away. It's Zeno's logic in real life. Paying off debt can feel the same way. You make a payment, but interest adds a little more. Every step forward seems to leave another tiny step to take. In health or fitness, improvement often comes in smaller and smaller increments. At first, you see big changes fast, but as you get closer to your goal, the gains get microscopic, making it feel like you'll never get there. Mathematicians eventually solved Zeno's paradoxes using the concept of converging series. Yes, there are infinitely many halfway points, but the total time to cross them doesn't add up to infinity. It adds up to a finite number. For example, if each step takes half the time of the previous one, the total time can sum to something small, like 2 seconds. In other words, infinity in divisions doesn't necessarily mean infinity in duration. That's why Achilles catches the tortoise, and why you do eventually cross the room. Even though math solved the paradox on paper, Zeno's ideas still challenge the way we think about time, motion, and progress. It's a reminder that the way we measure something can change how it feels. If you break a goal into infinitely small steps, it can feel impossible, even if it's completely achievable. That's why big projects feel endless if you only focus on micro details. That's why chasing perfection can keep you stuck. And that's why breaking a journey into too many milestones can make it feel like you'll never arrive. One way to escape the mental trap of Zeno's logic is to flip it. Instead of focusing on the infinite steps left, focus on the total distance covered. Instead of thinking, "I still have 40% of the project left," think, "I've already completed 60%. Instead of asking, "How much more do I have to do?" ask, "How far have I come?" This keeps your brain from falling into the illusion of endless halves. Zeno's paradoxes might not stop Achilles from winning a race, but they do reveal a strange truth. How we frame progress changes how we experience it. Yes, you can divide a journey into infinite steps, but the real world runs on action, not infinite logic loops. Sometimes, the only way to reach the other side of the room is to stop counting the steps and just walk. The paradox of time perception. Some days feel like they'll never end. You watch the clock, every minute dragging by, but later, when you look back, the whole day feels like it disappeared. Nothing memorable at all. Other days fly by in the moment. You're busy, excited, fully engaged. But when you think about them later, they feel huge and vivid, like they lasted forever. This is the paradox of time perception. The strange way time stretches and shrinks depending on whether you're living it now or remembering it later. Let's start with boredom. When nothing's happening, maybe you're stuck in a waiting room or sitting through a dull lecture, your brain is understimulated. With little to process, it focuses on every passing second. You become hyper-aware of the ticking clock and time feels slow. But here's the twist. Memory works differently from experience. When you look back on that boring day, there's nothing worth storing. Your brain compresses the uneventful hours into almost nothing. In your memory, the day feels short. It's like fast-forwarding through a movie with no important scenes. The time just vanishes. Now think about the opposite. A day full of new experiences, traveling to a new city, meeting interesting people, trying unusual food. In the moment, time flies because your brain is fully engaged. You're not thinking about the clock, you're reacting, exploring, immersed. But when you recall that day later, it's packed with details. Your memory is dense. Every event, every sight, every feeling gets stored. That density makes it feel longer in retrospect, even though it raced by in real time. At the heart of this paradox is novelty, how new and different an experience is. For young children, almost everything is new. That's why summers as a kid felt endless. As we get older, routines take over, novelty fades, and years seem to speed up. A year in adulthood can feel shorter than a single summer in childhood. Not because the clock changed, but because our brains stopped collecting as many firsts. Ever noticed how the first few days of a trip feel long, but by the end, the days blur together? That's novelty fading. At first, every street, every smell, every meal is new. By day 6, you've adapted, and time speeds up. During repetitive periods, like long commutes, routine work, or even pandemic lockdowns, days can feel slow in the moment, but disappear in memory. Without variety, the brain compresses it all into a blur. Weddings, concerts, or reunions often feel like they pass too quickly while happening, but when remembered years later, they occupy a surprisingly large space in your mind. Neuroscientists believe this paradox comes from the way we process short-term experience versus long-term memory. In the moment, we sense time based on how often we check it. When we're bored, we keep checking, so time feels slower. In memory, we judge time by how much content we store. The more memories packed into a period, the longer it feels in hindsight. This is why stressful situations, which demand high awareness, can also feel slow in the moment, but very long in memory. Your brain is in overdrive, recording everything. If you want life to feel longer and fuller, focus on adding novelty. Change your environment. Visit new places, even within your city. Learn new skills. Your brain expands time when it's working hard to adapt. Break routines. Even small changes, like taking a different route to work, can slow down time in memory. Be fully present. Engagement creates the richness that makes a moment worth remembering. On the flip side, if you want a difficult moment to pass quickly, like a workout or a stressful wait, immerse yourself in an engaging distraction so your brain stops counting the seconds. The paradox of time. Perception shows that long and short aren't just about minutes and hours. They're about how our minds experience and record them. A life on autopilot might feel fine in the moment, but in memory, it shrinks to nothing. A life full of novelty, challenge, and presence might feel like it's rushing past, but when you look back, it stretches wide. So maybe the secret isn't to try to slow time in the moment, but to live in a way that makes it worth remembering later.